Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Lauren. Um, I Morning, everyone. I'm going to talk to you today about how Homeless Link have worked with Conga to deliver £6 million of grant funding to homelessness charities in an incredibly short period of time. First of all, a quick introduction to me. I'm Matt Harrison. I am the Deputy CEO at Homeless Link. I've worked for Homeless Link for about 11 years, but actually I've spent my entire career working in homelessness. I worked in advice centres, hostels, day centres, information projects, and now in at Homeless Link, the national membership organisation for homelessness services. And there has been a theme of my career. Originally did a degree in computer science, and I've spent my entire career thinking about how we can appropriately apply IT to the problem of ending homelessness. Now, a little bit about Homeless Link. We are a charity. We are the national membership organisation for pretty much all of the homelessness charities in England that work directly with homeless people. We have a very clear vision to end homelessness in England. We believe we can and should end homelessness. Now, our work is a combination of work on policy areas, working with government at all levels and helping our members understand the policy and shape the policy environment, but also helping our members improve their practice and deliver better services to homeless people. And a third strand of what we do is to help our members be more sustainable, but also be resilient, be able to cope with, as best they can with crises like the current pandemic. And one of the ways in which we do that is we make grants and investments into our members, which is a slightly unusual thing for a membership organisation to do, but one we've been doing for some years. Now, as I said, we're a charity. We aren't an enormous organisation. We run a lot we don't have enormous resources. So we use a lot of technology to help us run the organisation effectively. And a lot of that, we run the organisation on Salesforce. We started work with Salesforce about 10 years ago. And actually, we are a Salesforce partner. We have an application on the Salesforce App Exchange called Inform, which is used by about 200 homelessness charities as a case management tool to record all the work they do with the homeless people that they help. But as you can see, we use Salesforce to run lots of our operations as a charity. And that meant that when, like thousands of other companies across the country and millions of companies across the world, we had to transition to working remotely overnight back in March. One of the ways we were able to cope was that we already had good use of technology, good use of Salesforce. So it made it not without challenges, but it made it a smoother process than it could have been. And the challenges that we faced were nothing up to the challenges that our members were facing. Because although when lockdown happened, loads of businesses had to close and staff were furloughed, and other businesses like ours had to move to work remotely, homelessness services had to keep operating because homelessness did not stop. In fact, in some cases, homelessness got worse because of the public health emergency. Now, our sector had to change a lot. Some of the services that they were used to running, like night shelters with multiple people staying in a single room, or with day centres with bringing together, tens or up to 100 people into one space, those were unsafe and had to close. But also, there was a crisis that there were thousands of people living in night shelters, living on the streets, in unsafe situations where they could not self isolate. They did not have anywhere to self isolate into. So actually, the government did something quite impressive. It instructed all local authorities to bring everyone into hotels, caravan parks, B&Bs, other hostels, to use businesses that had been closed to accommodate homeless people in safe rooms with their own bathrooms, which was a lot of work because our members, the charities, were really closely involved in running those services and supporting those homeless people. And our charities, our members, most of them are very small organisations. They faced significant increased costs. They had to buy PPE, which obviously was pretty expensive back in March. They also had to deal with quite high levels of staff sickness. We've just done a survey of our members and found that about one third of our staff had to self isolate at some point, sometimes multiple times. About one third of our staff were also doing childcare or homeschooling, and that the similar challenges were probably faced by all of you and by our members. So they had increased costs, but there was a massive impact on fundraising. Fundraising events had to be cancelled. For example, the London Marathon back in April, which would have raised 50, 60, 70 million pounds for charities. Lots of charities, in response to austerity, had diversified and have set up cafes and social enterprises and charity shops and trading businesses to try and diversify their income. And most of those businesses closed. with lockdown. So we were faced, as was most of the charity sector, with a situation of higher demand, h- increased costs, and reduced income. And you add those up together, and that's a crisis, not just for homelessness charities, but for the whole charity sector. Now, the government did listen. There was lobbying from the charity sector saying that potentially 4.3 billion was at risk of income for the charity sector. So on the 9th of April, the Chancellor announced a 750 million pound fund for charities to respond to the crisis. And a lot of that money went out via the National Lottery Community Fund, but also government departments were able to bid for funds for their areas of work. And the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government was successful in obtaining £6 million of those funds. And they asked us at Homeless Link to distribute that to our members because we know where the money should go. But they said to us, can you get the money out in 4 weeks? And that's a really challenging timetable, given that we're working remotely, given the level of demand, given the number of organisations out there, and given all the processes that we had to put in place. We had to design a programme, we had to open for applications, we had to receive applications, assess applications, carry out due diligence, then make decisions about who should get the money, and then actually sign grant agreements, grant contracts, and get the money out to people actually physically in their bank accounts within 4 weeks. And potentially that's the scale of 100 to 150 grants that were going to have to be processed. And that would be several hundred applications from charities looking for that money. So we said, yes, we would do it. It was very challenging. Obviously, we said we'd do it because we knew the need was there with our members. They badly needed the money. And we did it. Now, how did we do it? Well, we, like many of you, have been 100% remote with the staff team working from home since March. And that's been pretty successful. In fact, we hired a grants manager during this process. He started in April during lockdown. He's never actually been to the office or met any of his colleagues face to face. So that's an example of the sort of challenges we're facing. We had to operate not just at speed, really challenging timetable to get the money out in 4 weeks, but also we had to be really robust. We had to carry out good due diligence, and we had to be really fair and transparent so that people who didn't get money were confident that the money had gone to the right places. And also that we made sure there was no fraud, that the people who got the money genuinely needed it, and that we had a good audit trail of the decision-making process. So we had to examine each application. We received about 300. We had about 15 of our staff involved in assessing those applications, and we made 133 grants, and we paid it all out. Now, the processes we needed to operate had to be fast, but they also had to be fair and transparent. And crucially, there was no second chance at this. We had to get it right first time. So we used Salesforce. We ran the whole process on Salesforce. In fact, one of the rules I put in place at this was at the start of the process was that there were going to be no spreadsheets or documents. We all know the version control problems where someone has one version of a spreadsheet, someone has a slightly older version. There's a bit of confusion about exactly what's happened. So no spreadsheets or documents were allowed. Our Salesforce system was our system of record, our system of truth. So we had to get data in. We used an application called Form Assembly to collect data via our website on online application forms. We had to do grant assessment and due diligence. We used an application called Signify to do that. But actually, that worked really well for our staff who are all using Salesforce every day and have access to our Salesforce system. But for our grants panel, made up of trustees, representatives from funders, representatives from other homelessness charities, they didn't have access to our systems. They needed documents in the formats they're familiar with. They needed PDF papers. Our members who were going to get the grants don't have access to our Salesforce system. They needed to have paperwork that they could respond to in a format that they could understand. So we used Conga to produce all the paperwork. I say paperwork, actually it's all electronic paperwork, but all the paperwork in the formats that people are familiar with to supplement our Salesforce system and to store all of that paper trail in Salesforce. Now, there were three specific areas where we used Conga to solve our problems. So the first one is grant panel papers. So we had to create papers that would enable our grants panel in a very short period of time. I mean, if you ever run a meeting of 12 people over Zoom that takes a 4-hour meeting, you can imagine that with looking at 150 applications, that's a massive logistical challenge. We did that through really clear and well presented papers for the panel created using Conga from our Salesforce system. We also used it to create the contracts, uh, the various other bits of documentation like letters, but also state aid declarations. The government assessed that these grants was public money going out as state aid, and every recipient would need to sign it. And we needed to get all those contracts signed. Now, actually, for many small charities, that meant they had to be signed by their chair of their board of trustees or by their chief executive, not by the fundraiser who's filling in the form. So a lot of detailed work we needed to do. Here's an example of a grant assessment form. What this form does is it pulls in data from a variety of sources. So we're pulling in data from what we already know about the organisation, data from the application that they submitted, data from the supporting information they've given us, due diligence information we're pulling in from external public sources of data, and the assessment data from our staff. Pulling all of that together into a 1 or 2 page form that could enable our panel to make the right decision about who needed the money and who should get the money. Next, we see the grant agreements. We needed to have a legally robust grant agreement with each recipient, and we needed to have that signed. We've now got that. That means that when we are audited, both by our internal auditors next year, but probably also by government auditors next year, we have a really good audit trail and paper trail of where the money went, who received it, who authorised it, so that we could process that. Now, I've talked a lot about how we use Conga. It's an application. It's quite a complex application on the App Exchange. Now, how did it work? Well, actually, we found it really pretty straightforward. It took us some days to set up the templates and the batch processes, and crucially, to test, and retest, and really to tweak all the documents to get them 100% right. Now, admittedly, we have a big advantage. We are, as I said earlier, a Salesforce partner. So I have a team of in-house Salesforce professionals. We were able to deploy an in-house Salesforce consultant to work on this. He wasn't experienced with Conga, and it took him a few days, but not a lot of time. And we had a very clear vision of what we needed. In terms of the impact of what we've done, well, we got £6 million distributed to charities in record time. And when you look at the applications we received, some of those charities were in real financial difficulties, and this has got the money out there. It's been excellent for our reputation, as safe custodians of public money, and as an ability to run a really excellent process. And so that has led directly to the National Lottery Community Fund and Conflict Relief, giving us additional follow-on funds. So right now we are open again, and we're assessing and awarding more grants. We have 5.5 million in total. I think there's somewhere under 4 million left. There is a final deadline next Monday. So if any of you are working for a homelessness charity or know local homelessness charities, encourage them to apply. And we're still using the systems that I've talked about, the Salesforce systems, the Conga systems, to manage all that work. Now, that's I think in terms of sort of reflections on culture and reflections on how it's worked, we have embraced the use of technology at HomelessLink for some years. We had embraced the use of cloud technology, and we sell a Salesforce application. We use Salesforce in all our work. But most of our staff are not Salesforce experts. Some are, but some aren't. One of the things that we've done is provided us a lot of support for our staff to help them manage working remotely. A lot of assistance from the people in our team who are experts to help everyone to use it. And just real concentration on thinking about who needs the information, what formats they need the information in, and how we can be as transparent as possible in all of our work. That's enabled us to continue to support our members through this time, not just with Conga, but we've run webinars to inform our sector. We've done a lot of, we transferred our conference like this one from a physical one to an online event. And it's appropriate use of technology to really ensure that we can continue to deliver a vital impact to our members, even when everyone is working from home. Thank you.